Hello and welcome to the sessions held by e-sgol. This is the criminology session and I will be your presenter, Mr. Aaron Maddock-Jones. I work for e-sgol as a criminology teacher. Now over the next 3 sessions I will be making presentations on an aspect of criminology that pupils find particularly difficult, which are the sociological theories of crime. So in part 1, I've been looking at the ideas of functionalists, the ideas of Marxism, and the ideas of the interactionism. In part 2, 2.3, I'll be looking at the second part of these theories, which are the theories of right realism and the theories of left realism. Right realism, of course, has quite an influence on society today. And then I'll be turning my attention to 4.1, which is to see how these sociological theories actually work in the real world, how they influence government policy, how they influence how the criminal justice system works in practice. That is what is meant with policy. And finally, in the third presentation, we'll have a look at some examples to do with 2.3, that should be with 2.3 and 4.1 to see how they actually work in theory. Now then, your job in this part is to describe sociological theories of criminality. Now, I will be bringing in some evaluation as well, because it's good to do the evaluation as you're doing the description. You can describe the theory and then you can evaluate it, which ticks 2 boxes really. You've done biological theories by now, 2.1. You've done individualistic theories by now, which is basically with the individual. The theories that we're doing now, sociological theories, are more to do with society, how society works, how society interacts with each other. Now, those of you that do sociology and possibly politics will have done this in quite some detail. So the most important thing here is you do not need as much detail as you probably would have done in your sociological study. The focus here should be on criminality, how these theories actually explain criminality, rather than what these theories say about life in general, because obviously some of these theories go into volumes and volumes of work, and we don't need to be that detailed. So the questions that come up here will usually be about 6 marks, where you have to explain or describe a sociological theory of criminality, or you'll have to explain one social structure theory of criminality, which is basically the same, but it's to do with the structure of society rather than biological or individual. So we will be looking at work of the functionalist, the work of the Marxist, the works of the interactionist, right realist, and left realist. Now, first of all, the functionalists. Now, the functionalists are really the happy people of criminology, because they see a function in everything. Okay, they see a function in everything. They see crime and deviance as inevitabilities within society. Now, this is born from the work of a man called Emile Durkheim, who wrote in 1893 in his book, The Division of Labour, about how every society would have some form of deviance. Now, even in a society of saints, as you see on the screen before you, you would expect no crime at all, but even the smallest act within a society of saints would be classed as deviant. For example, wearing yellow trousers, would be making them different. So it would be leading to a deviant behavior. So deviance, more or less, is inevitable, as is therefore crime within society. Now, for the functionalist, there are positives to criminal or deviant behavior. Now, for example, as you can see on your screen there, it promotes social change. Now, the suffragettes would be a prime example of this. They campaigned for the right to vote at the start of the 20th century. They did criminal acts. They sent letter bombs. They tied themselves to the Houses of Parliament. They attacked members of Parliament. Now, these were all deviant stroke criminal acts. And the debate is that they contributed towards the Representation of the People Act in 1918, which allowed women over 30, albeit, the right to vote. So it led to social change. Another example you can see there is Rosa Parks, who refused to give up her seat on the buses in Montgomery, Alabama, thus contributing towards the civil rights movement and the eventual granting of the Civil Rights Act. It led to social change. More modern examples might be the behavior of Harvey Weinstein, which led to social change with the Me Too campaign. These all lead to social changes. So without this kind of deviant behavior and criminality, it would not have. It might have happened perhaps at a slower pace. We can't say that it would be inevitable, but you don't know that. So it promotes social change. Secondly, of course, it brings people together. The society in New York became a much closer unit after the 9/11 attacks, as did London following the 7/7 attacks. Another example is Shannon Matthews incident when she was kidnapped. The society came together. They looked for the person. They looked for this child, and cards and letters, etc., were part of the way that society came together. And you might yourself know of incidents where there was a criminal act or a criminal victim in your area, and it just brings society together, brings people together. Also, the functionalist ideas are that criminal behavior sometimes acts as boundary maintenance. It reminds us what is acceptable behavior and what is not acceptable behavior. So it keeps us all in check. It regulates us to make sure that we all know where the boundaries are. And also, it's a kind of warning light. It shows society that something is wrong. For example, the high number of knife crimes, if we are to believe, is true. In London at the moment might highlight a problem with poverty, especially amongst certain elements of society. So Durkheim was the first to develop the idea of anomie, where social instability, the breakdown of standards of individuals would lead to problems. No need to dwell too much on that, because the one to develop with this idea of is the idea of Merton's strain theory. Now, Merton was alive between 1910 and 2003, and he developed the idea of strain. Right now, strain is basically something that happens when you don't have the means to achieve the goals that you're aiming for. Okay, when you don't have the means of achieving the goals that you are aiming for. Now, according to Merton, what everybody was aiming for, and remember he was writing about American society, but it's just as relevant to us. What everyone was aiming for was the American dream. Now, the American dream, to all intents and purposes, was basically money, materialistic possession, and power. Okay, now this is what Merton said that everybody is looking to achieve. Now, if I was to ask you now, where do you see yourself in 20 years? Have a think about that one. It's very doubtful that anybody in their minds would think, I want to be happy, I want to be self-fulfilled. We all think in terms of, we want a fast car, we want a big house, we want a villa in Spain. So we're achieving, our goal in life is materialistic power, monetary gain. And for the most part, the majority of us have the means to achieve the goals, or we think we have the means to achieve these goals. But for some, they do not have the means of achieving these goals. Now, this might be because they don't have a supportive family. They don't have the monetary means of doing it. They don't have the educational standards needed to achieve it. They just don't have the means to achieve the goals. And this, according to Merton, led to criminality. Now, you can see the importance of this is to look at the people's response to the fact that they don't have the means to achieve the goals. Now, I won't be doing them in order, but one thing people response to not being able to achieve the goals would be compliance. Okay, that means you just carry on anyway. You'd be sitting by your computer typing away, thinking, right, I've got to work hard, I'm going for promotion next week, and then you get the promotion, and then in a few years you tapping away, saying, I'm getting more promotion. So you conform. It's compliance. You apply yourself to the task, and you keep going for that eventual goal, wherever the eventuality is. Third one there is ritualism, where you basically set yourself lower goals. You want a council house, you want a job that pays fairly well, you want to be working 2 or 3 days, possibly on menial jobs. So ritualism means you're setting yourself, you're going for the American dream, but you're setting the actual target of that dream considerably lower than you would hope for. Another one then is rebellion, where you would reject the norms of society. Now, that might mean you becoming part of a hippie commune, or becoming part of a commune, fighting for communist ideals, possibly political radicalism. You're basically rebelling against the norms of society. Okay. Now, there are two important ones as far as Merton was concerned, was retreatism. So you might retreat from society completely, become vagrant, become a drug user. That, of course, you can see the link there between criminality, criminal behavior, and innovation. You would innovate. Now, because you don't have the means of achieving the goals, you innovate. You look at other ways to achieve the goals. For example, you might step on people in order to get further up in the job. You might turn to selling drugs. You might turn to white collar crimes in order to achieve the goal in the end. So the two things that Merton spoke about was innovation and retreatism as being a cause for criminality. Now, his work was further developed by Cohen, and you might remember him from your work in Unit 1 on moral panics. And he talked about status frustration. Now, Cohen stated that this started early in childhood, in school, when young people or children internalize the idea that they're not going to achieve through normal means. They're not going to achieve, they don't have the means to achieve the goals. That makes them feel worthless, and it leads to frustration. Now, he called this particular issue status frustration, and it develops into alternative status hierarchy. That means where a culture is created that accepts different values to the norms of society. They refuse to take part in society, and they set their own goals and they set their own levels of achievement. So, for example, in the slide, you can see that some people might value the worth of property, but within this subculture, they would view destroying property as being more of a status symbol than anything else. Again, gang culture might explain this. Getting a job, getting a promotion, going to university would not be something that is respected. Perhaps acting violently, destroying property, stabbing somebody would be the alternative status hierarchy that is appreciated within the particular subculture. So frustration, again, born from strain, the fact that you do not have the means to achieve the goals, is a fundamental cause of this. And Cohen and Merton developed these ideas. Now, as with most of the theories, if not all, you will need to evaluate them at some stage. In the exam papers themselves, questions come up to explain or describe sociological theories or biological theories or individualistic theories. And then normally there's a follow-up question asking you to evaluate either one of them or all of them. If it's one of them, it'll probably be a 6-mark question. If it's all of them, it'll be a 9-mark question. So it's important that with all the evaluations that we have at least 3 strengths and that we have at least 3 limitations to these theories. Now, for this particular theory, it's good in explaining how crime can be a positive for society. The initial theories of the functionalists were that crime can lead to social change, for example, as I mentioned before. So it's good to explain how it leads to social change, suffragettes, etc. It shows how limiting people's choice in life can lead to deviant or criminal behavior. And that is something I'll be touching upon when I'll be doing 4.1, because one thing the present government is doing is following a levelling up agenda, where the policy is if they can improve people's chances of improving themselves, levelling up, level playing field, then that will lead to less crime. Now, we'll discuss that in more detail when we're doing 4.1. Again, a strength is that the theory, especially Merton's strain theory, shows a link between crime and poverty. Okay, the importance of that there are more poor people in prisons than rich people. Now, that could be again a social structure thing, which a Marxist might think is based on inequality, and the way government is run and the capitalist society. But we'll look at that in a minute. But the link between crime and poverty is shown clearly through Merton's strain theory. Now, the limitations or the problems with this theory is, although crime is essential for society to work properly, it doesn't mention this, and the anomaly theory doesn't mention how much crime is too many. When does crime become such a state that society breaks down? So we have nothing on that. Another limitation is, if crime is of a function, if it has a function, well, it doesn't have a function for those who suffer from it. You think of people who are mistreated as children, people who suffer rape. It's hard to see any kind of function to those type of crimes. So perhaps it's not as rosy as they would make out. Again, Merton tends to ignore crimes to do with the rich. Why, if they have achieved the aims of the American dream, why is it that some people like Bernie Madoff and Wolf of Wall Street and all the rich people that have been to jail, why do they commit crimes when they've actually achieved what we'd say were the American dream? So perhaps it's not quite as straightforward as the theory suggests. Now, next I'll be moving on to the Marxist, again, a social structure theory. It's a way society is structured to do with criminality. Okay, again, the work of Marx is volumes and volumes. He was alive between 1818 and 1883, and he was a prolific writer. But we need to focus on how the Marxist ideas explains criminality. Okay, so keep the focus on criminality rather than explaining the whole complexity of the theory. Now, basically, as you can see on the picture on the right there, Marxism's idea is that social structure is, at the top you have a strong elite who are ruling the weak and the poor below. Okay, now he was writing in the 19th century, obviously, but you can see how the ideas are still relevant to society today, because there is still a belief that there's a strong elite, rich people at the top, and there's a vast majority of people at the bottom who don't have the resources, don't have the money that those in the top do, because we live, as you can see in this picture, in a capitalist society. Okay, we live in a hierarchical society where there are very few people at the top who have a lot of the material wealth and the monetary wealth, 5%, and at the bottom you have the vast majority who have very little power, wealth, or materialistic things. So this is a capitalist society, okay, as Marx would refer to it. Now, capitalist society is a society where money and property is important, where the ability to make profit is held in high regard. And of course, we live in a capitalist society. There are other societies, communist societies, China, Russia, Soviet Union, who call themselves communist societies. But we are a capitalist society where we value money, property, and profit. Now, according to Marx, capitalism is wrong. Okay, wrong. And it's based on the system where you have some people on the top, and you call them bourgeois. Okay, the bourgeois, and they're at the top, and they own property. They own the means of production. Okay, and because they own the means of production, they want to make profit. Right? Now, at the bottom, then, at the lower end, you have the proletariat, the people who work for those who have the means of production. Now, this is 19th century. The idea of working class, upper class, and especially middle class was developing. Okay, during that time, wasn't developed. So Marx used the idea of bourgeois on the top, who owned things, who owned the means of production, had property, and at the bottom you had the proletariat who worked for the bourgeois. Now, of course, the idea is the bourgeois are basically oppressing and using the proletariat in order to make money. Now, because of this, some people do well at the expense of others. Okay, you're trying to win, you're trying to make profit, you're trying to get as much money and property as possible, material things, material value. So there's a great deal of pressure on people to offend because any chance that the proletariat have of success is limited. Okay, and the whole system is geared towards preventing a disruption of the status quo. The bourgeois do not want things to change. Why would they? They are making profit, they are making more money, they have all the money, they have the resources, they have the power. So the idea that nothing needs to change. Now, Marx actually, his ideas were for things to change, you have to destroy the complete capitalist society. You have to destroy it. And people have to live together in communes. Communism, communes, okay, where nobody would own anything. Nobody would own anything. It would be communal, right? I'm sure you have communal lavatories in your schools. Communal, everybody uses it. So communal society, everybody uses everything, right? The doctor would work for nothing. The farmer would work for nothing. We'd all work for each other. And the society then will be more equal. And in a more equal society, you wouldn't have to break the law. You wouldn't have to steal. You wouldn't have to break things. You wouldn't feel any frustration. So the idea is that a communal society, communist society, would lead to less violence and less law breaking. Now, whether that's true or not is debatable. So, communism, I have that in my mind. Capitalist state is a crimogenic state, according to Marx. The rich elite are in power, so they use the law, they use the structure of society to keep their privileged place in society, and they basically police the poor. Okay, they ignore the crimes of the rich, which might be one example you would have done in your coursework 1.1, white collar crimes, why those are less reported, why there are less people in jail. Marx would say it's because the poor are being policed. The capitalist system is basically crimogenic. It leads to crimes. Okay, so as you can see on the list here, poverty leads people to break the law in order to survive. They have to survive. They feel left out of society. They feel frustrated because of this, and therefore they break the law. Sometimes breaking law is the only way some people have in order to survive, to get food on the table if there's no help for them. So this creates a crimogenic society where people feel they have to break the law in order to survive. Another thing is that the capitalist society promotes consumerism. So people offend to get things. Now, consumerism is the need to buy things, to get things. Now, think of the things you had over Christmas now. Did you actually need the stuff you had over Christmas, or did you want the stuff you had over Christmas? So that is what a consumeristic society is. It's where having things, having materialistic things is valued. So if you've got a watch, you want an Apple Watch. If you've got an Apple Watch, you want a even better watch. I don't know what a better watch would be. If you've got a car, you want a bigger car, you want a faster car. So, and if you go on your Facebook and Instagram pages, on your social media, I'm sure there are clips, there are TikTok clips of people with big cars, and they have things that you all want. So, with consumerism, where it's always pushed upon us to buy, and to be wealthy and to be rich. This creates frustration. Okay. Now, inequality causes frustration and anxiety, which leads to violent crime. So people feel left out of society. They feel left behind. They're frustrated. They feel anxious, And this is how Marxism, for example, explains domestic crime. Domestic crime is caused by frustration of not being able to provide. It creates a pent-up frustration within a person, which affects relationships. So that's how Marxism would explain that type of crime. Now, even capitalists themselves commit crime. It's a dog-eat-dog culture. So it explains why, even after you've had a lot of money, you've gained a lot of money, why you want more. Even after you've got a fast car, you want more faster cars. We all see these footballers on television where they got 10, 12, 13, 14, 15 cars. They're pushing for more. So basically, it's all geared against the proletariat. The bourgeois implement partial administration of the law, selective law enforcement, i.e., they police the poor. Okay, less focus is given on, for example, corporate crime committed by big businesses, the breaches of health and safety standards. The current scandal about the post office is doing the rounds on television. Few, if any, well, nobody to this date in January 2024 has been charged with a crime in relation to the fact that many people went to jail when they should not have gone to jail. So the idea is that the poor are being, or the proletariat are being policed, where the elite, the rich, are not being policed, and it's in their interest to keep things as they are, to keep the status quo. And how they do this, according to Marxists, is through oppressive state apparatus. For example, the police, the courts, the armed forces. The police police the poor. They're out on the streets looking for burglars, looking for thieves, looking for vagrants, looking for drugs. They're not looking for white-collar crime. They're not looking for corporate crime. They are policing the poor to keep the system as it is. Now, of course, we teachers are just as guilty, according to Marxist ideologies. We push these ideas on people. We are part of the ideological state apparatus, where we teach people that the status quo is right. This is how it should be. Capitalism should be this way. This is how you make profit. This is go to school, go to university, get an apprenticeship. This is how you succeed in life. So teachers, religion, TV buy into the idea, of course, that this is how it should be. And just think of the way that communist countries like the Soviet Union, China are portrayed in the media. Their communist ideas are often looked down upon and frowned upon as not the ideas that we should be following, and there's something wrong with their system. Okay, so that's how Marx would explain criminal behavior and how society keeps the status quo as it is, because it's in the interests of the elite and rich. Now, again, we need to evaluate, okay? Now, strengths and limitation, again, go for 3. Your teachers might have a different 3 to what I've got. It doesn't matter which 3 you have, but try and aim for 3, especially if it's a 6-mark question. So you need 3 strengths and 3 limitations to give that balance that you'll need to provide a fuller answer. Now, strengths, of course, is that it considers crime across social classes. It does try and explain why poorer people break the law, frustration, not being able to achieve, being held down, oppressed by the society. But it also explains why richer people break the law, the power of consumerism, pushing people to always want more than they've got. Okay. It shows possibly how white-collar crime is being ignored and what the impact these inequalities are on society. How, of course, the poor are being policed because that's the way society works. That's the way the police are taught. This is what the police are focused upon doing. And again, it clearly shows the trend in law and order, policing the poor and ignoring corporate crime. Britain is often criticized by other nations for not putting enough effort into catching corporate criminals or corporate crime. So it does show why the prisons are full of people who would be considered by Marx to be proletariat rather than bourgeois. Now, as with every theory, there are limitations. Okay, Marxism ignores to a larger aspect the idea of gender and racial equality. It's all to do with class inequalities, according to Marxism, and the fact that racial inequality is linked to class inequality, as people from poorer racial backgrounds would tend to be proletariat or working class. So far more focus on class inequality rather than gender and racial. Interestingly enough, crime figures not high in some capitalist countries, for example, Japan and Switzerland. It may be a cultural thing, but it may also be something to do with the fact that they treat criminality in a different way. The prison systems are far more different. The chance to rehabilitate are different there, so it could be that is an issue. So it's interesting that crime figures are not as high in some capitalist country if capitalism is crimogenic, or why isn't it in these countries? Again, determinism, not all people resort to crime. The theory states that if you're from a proletariat, poor background, you're disadvantaged, you feel frustration, but that's not always true. Not all people who are poor, who are disenfranchised and disadvantaged, resort to crime. And of course, many rich people are prosecuted for criminal acts. Bernie Madoff, Harvey Weinstein, Jordan Belfort, the Wolf of Wall Street. Yeah, they were very, very rich. And if the police are policing the poor, how is it that these individuals actually went to jail? Okay. Now, the last one I'll do as regards 2.3 sociological theories for today is the interactionalist theories. Okay, the interactionalist theories. Now, this is to do with the work of Becker and Lemert, to all intents and purposes. And you've done a lot of this in Unit 1. And it's to do with, the social structure of society. Now, society shares common bonds, it shares common norms, it shares norms that they share together. Okay, and when people interact with each other in this way, using norms and the bonds and the values that we put emphasis on the society, it leads to a cohesive society. Okay, now the idea of Becker was that some people end up being labeled. Okay, now there were two types of deviance according to Becker. There was primary deviance and there was secondary deviance. Now, primary deviance is when you do a deviant act, but it doesn't lead to you being called a deviant. It doesn't lead you to being called a criminal. For example, some of us might speed occasionally. Perhaps you've gone on a train journey and bus journey and haven't paid. So these are things that are generally frowned upon, but it doesn't lead to anything. Okay, it doesn't lead to anything. Now, secondary deviance is deviance that actually leads to you getting a label. Okay, now the label in some cases becomes your master status. You internalize this label. So if you're a thief and you're called a thief and you constantly call the thief and label the thief, the idea is that you internalize that label and it becomes your master status. You are a thief. So that's the labeling theory of Howard Becker. And it explains to some extent why in society today, the police and the criminal justice system are very, very unhappy or unwilling to send younger people to prison. The last thing they want to do is to label that person a criminal. Again, we'll be discussing this in 4.1 in the second session. But it is understood that the label has a power. So the last thing I want to do is label anybody as a criminal from an early age, because it leads to, as you can see, the second bullet point there, what Becker referred to as a self-fulfilling prophecy. It becomes your master status. It leads you to fulfill that prophecy. It leads you to become that label. You've internalized it, you've accepted it, and it becomes who you are. Now, again, Becker referred to stereotyping and the power of stereotyping as creating a label. If you're a specific type of person, in the picture you can see mods and rockers, you are labeled, you are stereotyped as being a hooligan or being a person of interest to the police. So the police would stop you more often. Because football supporters are often labeled as hooligans, they're stereotyped as hooligans, chanting, troublemakers, keep away from them, especially on a Saturday. So this creates a kind of, as you would know from your Unit 1 work, a kind of moral panic. It is amplified by the media. We talk about the power of the media, again, in Unit 1. The media in creating folk devils, okay? People who are a danger to society. So it's all to do with labeling. Now, you would have covered a lot of this in your work in Unit 1, okay? The fact that when the mods and rockers met at Margate, there were a few scuffles, but the media, of course, made more of it than it actually was. They amplified the differences between the mods and the rockers. This actually played out in society then, where mods and rockers actually became different entities, saw themselves as different people, saw themselves as in conflict together. They accepted the label of being what the media portrayed them as, and it led to possibly more problems, more criminality than would have happened if they hadn't have been given the attention they did in the media. Now then, again, strengths, it draws attention to the negative result of labeling people, and this is why in 4.1 I'll be discussing more why they try not to give people, young people especially, labels. It outlines problems in the law and order system, how the police create the label of criminal, right? That they stop and search a particular ethnic minority. They propagate the idea that these are criminals. It becomes a master state, becomes, people don't help us, people don't look down on us. It creates an element of criminality within a person. Young people, for example, who are stopped and searched for knife crimes, are they creating a label amongst these young people? They are criminal. They're expected to be carrying knives. So it creates the criminality. And of course, it ultimately explains the power in the media in creating deviance and creating moral panics, and how they can demonize people through deviance amplification. Limitation, of course, it doesn't explain why deviant behavior happen, why some people decide to behave in a deviant way while others decide not to. It ignores the victim. It discusses the labeling that happens on the criminal, but doesn't discuss what happens to the victim, doesn't deserve the label of a victim that somebody ultimately gets. And of course, it's deterministic again. Labeling does not always lead to self-fulfilling prophecy. Some people get arrested, go to jail, come out, and they live perfectly law-abiding lives. They're able to turn things around. So labeling doesn't always lead to a self-fulfilling prophecy or an acceptance of a master status. Okay, so next time I'll be doing presentation number 2, which I'll look at the other 2 theories of crime, which is right realism and left realism. And moving on then to link those sociological theories to actual policy. What happens on the ground floor? How do governments and how does the criminal justice system actually administer these ideas or have adopted these ideas into their working practices? And then presidential theory, we look at exam questions based on 2.3, that should be, and 4.1. Thank you for listening today.